Without further ado, it is time for the main event. Phin, my brother, how are you doing?
I'm alive. That's the most important thing, you know. I'm alive. I'm happy. I am content. I am inspired. I am motivated. All positive in this household, despite the major challenges that are happening in this world.
Yeah, as you say, major challenges, but I guess keeping your head up's the only way you can keep things moving. And hey, there's a lot of opportunities that come off the back of it as well. So let's start actually with a point, I guess, in your life where you're very inspired to do something different, do something yourself. How did you find yourself in the wonderful world of startups, entrepreneurship? Because I know this was a bit of a long journey, if you like, a long time coming.
Yeah, I think, like many people, business is always kind of like run in the family, albeit failed businesses. Like my parents had so many, we had a family reunion last year and we were like counting the number of businesses that they started and that just didn't work out. And it was something like ridiculous, like nine. And I think I definitely always felt, and that time it wasn't called entrepreneurship, right? You were a business person at the end of the day, or a small to medium sized enterprise versus now with startups and all that lingo. So there was definitely, I think, a lot of DNA when it comes to entrepreneurship and business from a very young age. I recall working in some of those businesses. And then when I relocated to the United Kingdom in April 2020, my first job was much as it was for HOMESPLACE, it was for a subcontractor who was a small business. And a lot of the jobs I did afterwards were always with these like small startup business type of individuals. And I've always had a deep desire for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whenever you first arrived. By the way, Alan just notified me, someone I should have shouted out. We have a Slido tonight. If we'll be coming for you guys for Q&A later tonight, so get your question now, upvote the best ones, and if you're up for it, we'll invite you on screen and we'll say hi and bring in proper reunion that way as well. But yeah, on that note, then whenever, so you mentioned your family life, whenever you had a handful of different businesses. Some hopefully were moderately successful, and some perhaps not so much. Throughout your childhood, would you have considered yourself entrepreneurial? Was this a byproduct, or how did it all evolve?
Yeah, definitely not. And it's funny, when hindsight's 2020, right? When you look back at your life and as a childhood and some of the things you did, I definitely did not have the entrepreneurial DNA. For what I did have, which all these years later, which I've realized is a massive strength and skill set of mine, I was a massive supporter. That was probably one of the things, whether it was in junior school or high school, I was the kind of person you wanted to have on team. And I played a lot of team sports, the first team. And again, I knew my role. I wasn't the star player on the team. I was the supporter. And that has definitely kind of served me well in everything, and understanding that in the startup world, you've kind of got to decide where you lie. You're either, the star or the supporter. And in my case, definitely not the star. I'm a supporter.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm conscious not to try and jump around too much. I guess that's how you've found yourself now. While you might head up our global community and our partnerships team, that's all support. You're like perhaps happy to sit and, like, I say sit back. That's obviously not the case. Look at how many amazing people you brought onto this call today. So clearly you have the influence as well. But yeah, supporter as a tagline is fantastic. When would you say this was, like, when would you say you sort of realize this about yourself?
When my startup failed, I think when HOMESPLACE failed, it was very, very clear that not that I didn't have it in me, but more a case of you have to understand where your skill set lies. And part of this came from, as you interview all these founders who started Grind and you hear their stories, you just kind of hear certain commonalities in all of them. And it goes back to this whole star supporter, like know your role, right? Whether it was Skyscanner or like Black Circles or, Free Agent, like any of these companies that we interviewed along the journey, it was always that understanding that for certain founders, they needed something in their DNA. And I think for me, for whatever it was at that stage, I did not necessarily have it with HOMESPLACE, and I'm sure we'll kind of come to it at some point in this conversation. But I definitely knew my role, which I'm very comfortable with now.
Mm-hmm. So that was perhaps later on then. We're talking like 2015, 2016, later on. If we bring it back then more towards say you're a young man. I know you made the jump from Zimbabwe over to the UK. What was that experience like coming from Africa to Europe, perhaps coming with with not as much of a support network as you would have had, of course, in your hometown, home place. So
Yeah, I think for us, what used to happen is like I grew up in Zimbabwe, born and raised there. It was a very beautiful country. Unfortunately, it's had its challenges. But what typically used to happen is secondary school was incredible. And then it was a very privileged thing, without a shadow of a doubt. I think it goes without saying that I have had a very privileged background, and massive thanks to my parents for that upbringing. But typically, your parents would send you abroad to, go do your tertiary education, so go to college, university, or whatever. And I really wanted to go to the US. It didn't work out because it was super, super expensive. So I ended up in the UK where my sister was. And it was cool. Like, I loved being in the UK, was in London, just like living in Beacon Tree at the time. I got here April 2020. I wasn't starting college until September 2020. September 2000. Geez, that was 20 years ago. So yeah, got here April 2000. Wasn't starting college till September 2000. And my sister was like, you're not going to bum around for the next few months. You got to get a job. And I was like, what? Like, I've come from, a life of luxury, and now you're telling me I have to work. So I applied, and the first job I got was as a bartender / waitress in this company called HOMESPLACE, the Broadgate Club. And it was fascinating. It was literally like one of these experiences where like I'm having to work, but then I was meeting all these people and learning about what they were doing, and almost discovered, like, again, I'm like 18 at this time, this ability to build relationships with people very, very easily that allowed me to really well and truly get to where I am today.
Mm-hmm. I guess on that comment, for many people coming to a new city, a new place, particularly where you might be, well, it's a topic we're very much to come to, where you might be a minority, at least compared to the walking down the street. I was going to ask what that kind of experience was like, but I mean, you, Finn, I probably imagine it was quite a quick pick up friends everywhere you go.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to the UK before then plenty of times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like on holidays, but it's very different when you live somewhere. Working in that environment, because it was a health club, it was a sports environment, people were very friendly, and it was like you'd have the regulars, right? The people that would come and get their smoothie, milkshake, or they get their power protein, and you'll just build relationship and ask them questions. And I think that's the thing in life, right? That was a skill set that I have discovered over the years, that it's important to ask questions and build relationships with people. And it's probably one of the reasons why I love doing Startup Grind, right? Because I got to ask the speakers questions and interview them about their journey and ultimately build relationships with them that way.
Yeah. How, on this note, we're quite early in, but how is it to be on the other side of the seat?
It's actually a little bit nerve-wracking, right? I mean, I've done like one of these before, like for Birmingham, but it was way smaller than this. I think there were like 7 people in the room. So I was joking with Daniel saying, I bet you, if I get to 10, okay. If I get to 20, I'm good. It's good to see these 58 people on the call. So thanks, everyone. You've made me sleep better tonight.
I'll tell you what, I, like you, I enjoy being this side of the chair. I find other people's stories very, very interesting. Now, moving on, your own story. You went through your college experience, and then you went into the real estate space. What drove you in that direction?
I dropped out of college, much to my parents' chagrin. I was studying information systems, and it was okay. I mean, to be fair, that helped give me like the technical background that I have now, which has been incredibly useful, even still to this day, to be very comfortable around computers. But I hated college, to be honest with you. I hated just sitting in a room and like listening to people. And I think what didn't help is I had been working in fact, it was pretty much full time leading up to when I went to college, and then you could only work part time on the visa that I was on. So I'm working part time, and I'm meeting all these really impressive people at like the Broadgate Club, and it was in the city, like right in the city in Liverpool Street. And then I'm like going to this college in like Clapham South, and I'm like, oh, it just did not like vibe out with me. So 2 years in, that time I'd gone from the Broadgate Club, I got transferred to HOMESPLACE in Canary Riverside. And then one of the members, again, building relationships with the members. One of the members was like, you're very good at building relationships. You'd make a great estate agent. And I'm like, what does an estate agent do? And they're like, oh, you just go around show people around properties, and they either rent them or they buy them. I'm like, okay, cool. And it's like, yeah. And they told me what the basic salary was. And it's like, really? I'm like, oh, you get commission as well. So the basic salary was what I was getting at that time. I was a receptionist at HOMESPLACE in Canary Riverside. So that was my basic salary. Plus I'll get commission. And then he's like, oh, you'll also get a company car and a mobile phone. Bear in mind, I'm a 23-year-old at this time. And I'm like, company phone and a company car? Where do I sign? And that was Franklin James, and the rest, as they say, is history.
There you go. And I presume in that role, you were obviously always Mr. Relationship. Pick up a little bit of sales, a little bit of that whole mojo as well.
The first year was, I love working for Startup Grind. Absolutely love it. Very different dynamic to my role as an estate agent. But the first year, and I'm a 22, 23-year-old at this time, about 21 actually. We would literally work. Our working hours were 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Thursday. So you get in the office 8:30, work from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Typically Monday to Friday after 7:30, 8 o'clock, we just go to the pub or the bar at the time afterwards. It was just that sort of lifestyle about work very, very hard, but play extremely hard as well. And it was incredible. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, a great way to spend your early 20s, to be honest. Imagine the concept of going to a bar with your friends. Like, I don't know how everyone's different situation is, but there's a fair few of us locked up in Scotland. They're all shut. So, what a concept. Maybe it'll return one day. Let's just say it better.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so you get your legs under you. You're really enjoying this job, and then we move on to 2006, 7. Whenever you're going in a slightly different direction at the perfect time in real estate, right?
Yeah, it was crazy. And this was so, you're young, you're naive, you're ambitious. And I say this to my team now, in that progress is a process, right? And you'll hear me say this a lot of the time, because when you're a little bit younger, as I was, by this time, I'm like 24, 25, super ambitious. I'm like to Sandy, the guy that owned Franklin James. I want to own equity in the company, I'd been promoted to like head of residential lettings. I wanted equity in the company. He wasn't giving up equity at the time. And back then I called it shares. I didn't call it equity. I was like, I want shares in the business, because my parents had always told me ownership is king. So just try and get ownership in whatever businesses you're involved with. And I was like, promote me. I want obviously shares. I was earning a ridiculous amount of money for a 24, 25-year-old at the time, driving estate agents were, those in the UK that know estate agents, it's one of the most hated industries, because it's just so sales driven, but it was super fun. And then I met this is the Scottish connection as well. My then girlfriend, now wife, who had actually come in as a client. That's how good I was at sales. So not only did I sell the property or rent the property to her, I then also got on a date with her. I don't, condone professional dating, but this was the early 2000s. And she got pregnant, and we were like, okay, let's do this. It was love at first sight, loved it dearly. Financially, there were no concerns. So I was like, cool, I'm 25. Let's have a baby. Let's do this thing. And then I got offered a job to almost be like a consultant, on significantly more money. But I was very naive here, because it was like an independent contractor. So I left Franklin James with this, secure job, secure salary, company car, company mobile phone, having a baby. My daughter was born in February 2007, 12th of February 2007, for those that want to send her a birthday message one time. And then in July 2007, I handed my notice to Sandy, and Sandy was gutted. He didn't want me to leave. He tried to convince me, and I told him, look, I want to go. It was in hindsight, it was a very naive decision. I'll tell you that now. You've got, a baby that's a few months old, and you're leaving that security to start up on your own. But I'd been promised ridiculous amounts. And to be fair, this is where you can't predict life. Like, life will come at you with certain things. It's how you react essentially to life and adapt to it. And so when I left July 2007, got into like, we're doing property investment deals, and it was all off-plan deals, had a pipeline of like nearly £2 million worth of property deals. I was going to work away with like a couple $100,000. And this was like maybe 3 months, 4 months of work. So definitely like super comfortable. And then fast forward a year, I remember getting a call from my mortgage broker, and he was like, have you watched the news? Like, switch on the news. I'm like,
no conversation has ever started well with someone phoning you to say, have you seen the news?
So I'm like, what's going on? I was like, you need to switch on the news now. And I could tell, like, I had loads of friends who were like ex-investment banker clients from my days working in Canary Wharf as an estate agent. And I remember having dinner with one who worked at lunch with one that worked at Citigroup. And it was like, you know, this mortgage-backed security market, the wheels coming off it. And this must have been in like, I think it was about June 2008. But I was like, I didn't really understand those investment banking terms. Like, whatever. We're property's always safe, we're doing okay. But we didn't understand the financial intricacies and the background of how, you know, we used to get our mortgage finance. So anyway, watched the news, and then there was a run on Northern Rock. Now, Northern Rock, major bank in the UK that used to do a lot of the buy-to-let lending, which is who we used to get all our financing on. And when I can tell you, like, your world comes to a standstill where all the mortgage product markets got pulled for the market, your funding literally collapsed, everything comes to a standstill. It was a horrible experience. Very, very horrible.
Yeah. No journey has ever been smooth, but that must have been a pretty rough time.
Brutal.
Yeah. And off the back of that, some things have to scale down. You have to like change a few bits and pieces. You find yourself in Bonnie, Scotland. Apparently you can understand your wife's accent, which is a good start.
She's a fighter as well.
Oh, impressive. Now that must have been interesting. But you find yourself in Bonnie, Scotland. We'll fast forward maybe a wee bit onto the what was going through your mind whenever HOMESPLACE came into your head and said, this is something that needs to be done and I'm the man to do it. What was on your mind at that point?
Yeah, so, I mean, 2008, we moved up to Scotland. Plan was to be in Scotland for 2 years. We ended up spending 9 years there. Had an additional 2 children, so ended up with 3 kids. I'd always done property, so then I set up this company called Two Property Group, which did okay. I mean, helped pay the bills and navigate, you know, some of the journey we were in at the time. But I'd always felt the technology piece and the technology background I had, and at the time, companies like Rightmove and Zoopla had like really done really well at the time, really well. And I was like, look, there has to be a way to do property different. And so the initial concept behind HOMESPLACE was we were going to curate every single property in the United Kingdom, and then you could basically buy property on demand. So very similar. And this was like when Uber and all those had like come out in like 2009. So when I started like working on the concept in like 2012, 2013, I was like, if you can order a car on demand that you want, surely you can do the same for property. There was not a market for it. Like, just people didn't really care. And then I decided to pivot because at the time it was still very, very hard for first-time buyers to get a mortgage. So we figured, well, what if you could essentially do residential crowdfunding for first-time buyers? So you're a recent graduate, you've just graduated from university, you've got a job in London, you're working, you're on a decent salary, but rather than renting and paying an extortionate amount in rent, we can allow you to buy, and you'll basically part rent, part buy, and do that. So that concept was very well received. At one point, I nearly raised like 500,000. Thank goodness I didn't end up taking that money. It was just like going super well. But the biggest issue was getting mortgage, financial, well, at that time it was a Financial Conduct Authority that rebranded, like, so from the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. And I just couldn't get like approval to get like a regulated mortgage product to the market, which meant that idea died in the water. Mm-hmm. Plus, at that time, you're talking now, this is like 2013, 2014. That was when I'd stumbled across Startup Grind.
Yeah. So last one on the HOMESPLACE one before we go into the full Startup Grind story, which I know I'm really excited to hear, and I'm sure most of the people on this call are very excited to hear. The last one on HOMESPLACE. what did you learn, or what are some of the things you learned from that experience? We touched on earlier, for example, you're a supporter. This is perhaps maybe a big epiphany that came from around this time. What other things did you pick up from? Was it sounded like a pretty good idea that ran into regulation, ran into a few different roadblocks? What are some of the things you picked up from that whole experience?
Yeah, I mean, well, regulation is what ultimately killed it. I would almost say the biggest lesson that I learned was you need to build a team. If I had got someone that was super in tune with the regulatory markets and understood it well, and I'd spoken to consultants who wanted thousands and thousands of pounds, which I obviously didn't have at the time to pay them to help me get it sorted, it could have been a very different story. So probably the greatest lesson I've learned is you absolutely need a team. That is probably fundamental to the success of any startup. You need an incredible team behind you. And look at any successful company in the world, whether it's your Facebooks and your WhatsApps and all that stuff. But Facebook, all we see is Mark, right? That's what everyone sees. But in the background, there were those core people that helped them along the way to get Facebook to where it is. And that's what I essentially lacked.
Mm-hmm. As you say, so you're like, right, I was lacking a team, maybe in retrospect, or at the time, I'm lacking a team. How do you build a team, or how do you meet more people, co-founders and such like? So you're Googling, right? You're Googling, and then you come across something.
Good old Google. So every year every December, I try to take a solid 2 weeks off, and I just reflect. I reflect on some of the goals I'd set at the beginning of the year, where I want to go, obviously the following year. And I'm doing this, and I'm like, I've been in Scotland now, at this point, it'd be like 5-6 years. I'm struggling, honestly, I'm struggling financially. Things are just not working out. I got 3 kids. This is brutal. This is not pretty. I'm nowhere near where I thought I would be in life at my age, because again, bear in mind, I've always been super ambitious. And then, so I come across this organization. Well, what had happened is I actually thought, you know what, maybe I need to build up my profile. And the best way to build a profile is I can do events, because I'd been to a few events which were terrible. They were okay, but it was like you're the only guy that stands in the corner and no one wants to greet you, and the host is like super snobby and you can't speak to them. I remember going to one event at RBS's Go-Go Burns. This is actually really what triggered it for me. This event, it was super event, really nice event, like well put together. But the host, who shall remain nameless, he was just like so standoffish and didn't want to engage with the attendees. They were like them and the speakers just in a huddled corner. And I was like, that shouldn't be the way an event should be, right? There's got to be something better than that. And so I thought, look, maybe I'll just start putting on my own events. And then at that time, YouTube was like really taking off. I was like, maybe what I'll do is I'll record them and I'll do breakfast with Richard Branson, or dinner with whoever.
Just aiming low, not pushing the boat out.
always being ambitious, right? So there was one fundamental problem. I had no network. Zero network in the startup space. Yes, I'd been interested in the startup world, but I had literally zero network. So I'm Googling away, how to start up events, and I come across this organization called Startup Grind. And of course, what caught my eye was, Startup Grind powered by Google for Entrepreneurs was what they were powered by at the time, before Google for Entrepreneurs branded to Google for Startups. And I thought, oh, this looks pretty cool. And, they showed all these chapters all around the world. It's like, oh, this is interesting. And it's like, oh, you can apply to lead a chapter and be a chapter director. I'm like, oh, this is nice. So deep down, I'm a bit nervous, because I'm thinking, it's a little too good to be true. I bet you there's going to be like $2,000 to get like the franchise license or something ridiculous like that. And so I apply. This nice guy called Francisco replies and says, yeah, we reviewed your application. We'll set up an interview with you, with the CEO and founder. His name's Derek Anderson. He'll kind of tell you if you're a fit and all of that stuff. So I'm like, oh, cool. So we set up the interview, and at the time it was on Skype. That's showing our age.
Nice.
Interview was on Skype. So interview day comes. I hop on this call, and this guy jumps on the call, and he kind of looks like me, except he's white. He's bald, but he kind of looks like me. So there was this automatic affinity between me and him. It's like, hey, my name's Derek Anderson, and I got this company called Startup Grind, and we're looking for these leaders. I don't speak like Derek Anderson, but I'm just trying to put on his American accent. we have all these like chapters all around the world, and like, you know, we're growing like crazy, and you know, we're going to do incredible things. I'm just looking for people just that have got that startup DNA. And then I'm like, okay, all right, cool. Like this is interesting. And I'm like, so like, how does the business model work? And he's like, well, you know, you're never going to get rich doing startup grind, just so you know, right? I'm like, oh, bummer, okay, right, you know. And then I'm thinking he's going to tell me you're going to need to pay, you know, like whatever, $2,000 or whatever. I'm like, there's no way my missus is going to allow me to like pay this $2,000 when, you know, hardly bringing that in a month. It's like, so the revenue split is like 80-20, and it's standard across. Everyone's like 80%, 20, whatever revenue you bring in, you get to keep 80%, and we just take 20%. And I'm like, And so obviously naivety again is kicking in. I'm thinking, so if I sell some sponsorships and some ticket sales, yeah, first event, I'm sure I can sell so many tickets and like, you know, charge people like $20 or something like that. And, you know, maybe make like 5,000, and, you know, they get to keep $1,000. I get to make $4,000. That could work, you know, just bring in 5,000 a month and I get to keep $4,000. They get to keep, that works. Sign me up. So it's like, yeah, okay, so you're in. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, so Francisco's going to onboard you. You'll get an email. And then the systems at the time, and probably guys like Alex's office, there was like Basecamp, and like it was WordPress. We've come a long way. But yeah, started from there, and then now we're here.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? From there to here, fair few steps in between. You had your first event to run. You had to get like a speaker for this first event. Maybe you asked your friend or who did you have for your first speaker, for context, and let us know how all that came about.
Yeah, so very fortunate to get Gareth Williams of Skyscanner, who got acquired by like for 1.4 billion, I think it was, by Trip.
Yeah, they are Scotland's. I want to say Scotland's only unicorn, not quite right. We have Brewdog and we did have FanDuel, but
Yep.
in effect, it is our poster child company, and that was Finn's first speaker.
Yes, I got again super lucky with that. It was, so what we used to do is you had to make a list of 10 potential speakers you'd have for your event. And Francisco was like seriously religious about this. You had to provide this 10 list as part of like your onboarding process on who you were going to get for your events. And they always say, like, choose big speakers. And they would always like say, you know, look at London, you know, you're in the UK, so London, look at the events I've done. And like London had hosted like Caprice, something like that. And I was like, God, Marion's hosting Caprice.
With Marion, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And he had all like these really cool founders, because he had started in a few months earlier, like in August 2013. So he had got, you know, a few months ahead. So I'm like going through like the business pages. I'm like Googling who are the top entrepreneurs in Scotland. And there was like Jim McCall, the Skyscanner company, everyone had been rating about them. So there was like there was Gareth Williams, Connor May. There was like quite a few. So I made a list of all the founders of Skyscanner. There was Ed Molyneux from Free Agent. There was like Sir Tom Hunter. Just made this list of 10 names. So I look at the list and I'm like, okay, realistically, who's the most accessible person on this list? Let me just fire off a few emails. Fortunately, the first email I fired to was to Ed Molyneux, a Free Agent. He's just like the startup grind thing.
Cold email?
Cold email. Yeah, connected up with him on LinkedIn first. So obviously, you know, connected up with him on LinkedIn, got his email from LinkedIn, sent him an email, being like, listen, there's this thing called Startup Grind with Dern, powered by Google for entrepreneurs. That was always the thing you got in there, like powered by Google for entrepreneurs. Bringing it to Scotland, got big plans from it. I'd love to host you as a guest. Are you interested? And it's like, look, this sounds really interesting. Come to my offices and we'll chat. Go to his offices, have an hour meeting. Super nice guy, really, really nice guy. And it was like, look, I'm probably not the best guy to launch the first event with, but there's a few people I know in the ecosystem. Like, tell me some of the names you're interested in. So I gave him the names, like Gareth and Sir Tom Hunter. Like, oh yeah, I know Gareth. Gareth's a mate of mine. I'll introduce you. By the time I got home, it took me like 45 minutes to get home. He's introduced me to like Gareth Williams, like Colin Hewitt from Flow, like Leslie Eccles from FanDuel, like a host of all. It was about 5 of them. I'm like, great, I'm in here. Let's do this. So emailed Gareth. Gareth at first was like, doesn't sound like me. Sounds interesting. Maybe in the future I'll do it. I'm traveling in Singapore. We've launched an office in Singapore. I'll maybe do it later on. And then I replied to him. I was actually trying to see if I could find the email. And I put together this long email. I think he maybe felt sorry for me, which maybe is like a theme that I'm going to share. Lots of people feel sorry for me. So I sent him this long email trying to justify why I think he should be the first speaker and launch, because Skyscanner is doing incredible things. And then the Saturday morning, I get a reply from him early in the morning Saturday. And it's just like, look, that was a very well thought out reply. Sounds interesting. I want to hear more. Why don't you meet up with me for a beer tonight? I'm like, oh, snap. Saturday came on. And I think it was supposed to be like date night or something like that. And like, so I dished my wife for Gareth. So we go, the honest truth is I think he was jet lagged, right? Because he was like, we're having these beers. And it's like, yeah, I've just flown in from Singapore. He's obviously jet lagged. So you might as well like meet up with this guy for a beer. We have, a few beers, absolutely laugh, absolutely cracker guy. He agrees to do it. Then he says, I'll host it at Skyscanner's offices. And that was our first event, hosted at Skyscanner. And then second event, so that was a great event, had like 60 odd plus people in the room. I don't know if Lisa was at first event. Second event was Ed Molyneux, so still feeling good. It's like, yeah, and Ed was actually in the room for the first event. So second event hosted, and we're like, yeah, this is going to be great. This is Scotland in like March. It's chucking it down with rain in Edinburgh that day. I mean, the rain is terrible. I had like, I think it was 11 people registered for the event. I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling sorry for myself. And that was the first time I met Lisa. So Lisa comes to this event, and I'm like, oh, Lisa got a few more people. She's like helping out around like Super Network. And I'm like, oh, this person's like really cool. I need to build my team. That's one of the things I need to do. And I'm like, so listen, you're interested in kind of being a part of the startup grind thing that I'm kind of doing. She's like, well, I'll kind of see, I'll maybe come to a couple more events and then we'll take it from there. And lo and behold, I think it was 2 events later with like Leslie Eccles and then Colin Hewitt. She came on board as my co-director.
There you go. It's actually, I'm sure many of you can relate with your own startup grind family you have in your own chapters. Both Alan and Emma, long-time attendees at events, and over time got more and more involved until it's like, so it appears you're in the team. Would you like to formalize this? Because you're basically in the team anyway. And you just get surrounded by fantastic, amazing people. So you've built out a team. First event goes fantastically. Second event, you learned the power of the Scottish weather. It's one never to be questioned, never to be overcome. Yep. But yeah, you basically build this community from scratch, effectively. Great speaker, had your event, a lot of things worked out very well in this one. But you have this community internally. You start getting like repeats, people coming back again and again and again. Around this time, you must, I don't know, like this is the thing, I'm newer to Startup Grind. With global and everything, what was your first time meeting many of the beautiful faces we have in the audience, for example?
Yeah, so obviously I get the license in January 2014. Global was happening in February 2014. Still very broke, so no way I'm flying to San Francisco. So I'm sitting, they were like live streaming it at the time, and I'm sitting at home in Kokodi, like watching this live stream thinking, oh, wow, this is incredible. Seeing all these speakers at the event and just, I'm a massive visualization person. So like, I believe you've got to like visualize things and manifest things into your life. And I'd say to myself, next year, come what may, I got to be there. Come what may, I got to be there. And then it happened. And first year, 2015, flew out of San Francisco. It was my first time in San Francisco. And I think we were maybe like 30, 40 directors, if I'm not mistaken. There's this picture of us on like the background is like San Francisco Bridge. There's about, maybe 30, 40 of us. And you're meeting all these people from all around the world, from like Stockholm and like Mumbai in India, like Cape Town in South Africa, and Patrice and like Albany, New York, like all these incredible chapter directors. And I was just like, wow, my mind was blown away. And I realized that I don't think anyone, right, with like my background or humble backgrounds type of thing could have the opportunity to have this kind of access to such a global community. And Startup Grind gave me that access from that day dot. And it's what I say to every chapter director now that joins. You have access to a global community from day one, right? If I want to think, you know what, I'm interested in launching my business in Barcelona or connecting with people in Barcelona, I don't have to go on LinkedIn to like look up. I'm just pinging Alex, you know, and Alex is super connected in Barcelona, knows an abundance of VCs, an abundance of obviously, you know, the top kind of people to be connected with in the startup ecosystem. I'm just reaching out to him. And that's the power of Startup Grind. And that's the power of our global community, that you ultimately have access to this incredible community of startup ecosystem leaders all around the world.
Absolutely. And I think many of us here, most of us here, have had the pleasure of experiencing that, either with one or two people we've been able to jump on a call with, or at Global, at Europe, at any of the above. So many amazing directors, and it's a pleasure to know you all in the audience and so many others that are out there as well. On the note, one thing I want to touch on is mentorship, and also there's another topic. By the way, keep getting your questions in. We're coming to the audience Q&A. I could sit here, right, Finn? I could sit here all night. And I genuinely wish I could, and I wish you could, but you're a busy man. And I'm very, very keen to give the audience a voice as well, because there's a lot of great questions building up there as well. So in about 10, maybe 10, 15 max, we're going to be going to the audience Q&A. So keep voting, keep putting the questions in, and we'll be coming to you guys real soon and get all those questions answered. Now I want to talk a little bit about like mentorship and say inspiration and things that inspire you. So reading back to an interview you did actually when you recently started Startup Grind in Scotland back in 2014, you mentioned one of your key pieces of advice was to effectively find a mentor. You mentioned the team, you mentioned a good idea, and then you mentioned find a mentor, someone who's ahead of you in this space. So what are some of your thoughts for finding a mentor who's right, and who do you look up to?
Yeah, so my mentor is a guy called Stuart Richardson, Scottish English guy. I met Stuart within the first few months of moving to Scotland back in this was 2008. So I think we moved in April 2008. I must have gone to, he had sold his business, and then he was like helping out Business Gateway at the time. And then he used to do all this thing. And me and Stuart and I have weekly calls to this day, right? You're talking nearly 12 years later. We still have calls typically every week if we're not, if you know, our schedules don't allow, every single week for an hour just to catch up. And he used to do this thing at the end of every event where he's done his training sessions, and he'll say to people, if anyone wants to connect with me, here are my details, reach out. And years later, he told me, I was like, he would say that in a room full of 20 people, and maybe 2, 3, if he was lucky, would reach out to him. And then they'll fail to follow up. For me, my thing was I had nothing to lose. So I'd follow up with him. Here's a guy, he had sold his business, you know, I'm struggling. I'm trying to build up my network in Scotland. And we just started talking, and we spoke, and we started meeting regularly. And this was informal. And this has always been my thing when I've spoken about mentorship, that you have to build a relationship with someone almost informally first before you can be formal. I take nothing away from people that are like business coaches and saying this is going to be a formal mentorship, mentor-mentee relationship, and there definitely is a market for it. But you ultimately have to just vibe with the person. And the best way to do that is to build a relationship over a long period of time.
Yeah, I was just saying that's how you got your own mentor. And this is how you got your own mentor, in terms of do you get mentored by people you don't really know, people that inspire you or you look up to, and that kind of thing?
So the weird thing with that is, I mean, there are loads of people that I love autobiographies, are typically the books that I read. And this is another reason why I absolutely love Startup Grind. Right? I remember one time there was a quote that was put on the website that every Startup Grind interview I did, or even when, you know, Lisa was doing it and I was sitting in the audience, to me, it was almost like you're sitting in an MBA class. That was the analogy I used to give it, because you're learning all these incredible nuggets from these entrepreneurs and speakers that have been there, done that, got the battle scars to kind of share. And, you know, it's either free if you've got a complimentary ticket, or if you've paid like $10 or $10 for it. I'm just surprised we don't get more people that do it, right? Or realize that you have access to these incredible speakers. I remember the Jim McCall event, and we'd taken, like Lisa and I, it had taken us months to try and get Jim, like backwards and forwards, and then he finally agreed to do it, and we're like, we've done this. This is going to put us on the map, you know, one of Scotland's billionaires. And Jim was the most like unassuming billionaires I've ever met, right? Like the guy had driven himself to the event and he just shared gold, shared absolute nuggets that, you know, people could view that as a mentorship session in and of itself that you've got for paying like $10.
Yeah. And this is the thing, and we see it ourselves at our various events. Jim McCall being a prime example. I think in Scotland we tend to be quite humble beings anyway. So it's like nice to hear that was. And I guess it's one of these things where opportunities come to you when you put yourself out there, and I guess go looking for them. So the main part I want to touch on now, I'm going to do this for another like 5-10 minutes and we're coming to the audience, because there's a lot of great questions there.
Although Johnny, before we go into your final question, like, you know, everyone is loving your background.
I did see that, yeah.
that is, I mean, it puts mine to shame, but we'd definitely love to hear your inspiration behind that. I mean, this is seriously bootstrapped.
We're gonna make up call it a metaphor for your early startup life. Whenever you're bootstrapping things, you can only afford certain things. No, honestly, I could only carry so much whenever I moved. So my banner is still sitting in my home. For context, I moved recently. So so this is what we do. Man. Have to share the background, the banner, and everything
else. You even
got
the baddies in there as well. So
of course,
love it.
You gotta live the values. And I'd say, you want Emma?
I was going to say that's actually an improvement on his recent screen. He had a green bed sheet behind him. He used to often fall down, and his floating head would appear. So I'm all for whiteboard.
These are some of my own startup grind stories. Yes, Dan.
I just want to say, like, that's still the banner that Finn bought about 4 years ago. the one that's still sitting in your house, the one with like the bent pole that everything you have to put it in like a certain direction, or else it doesn't, or else it like falls down. Yeah, we've still got that.
It's still kicking about. Can confirm. We had a banner for the uni chapter back when I was doing that, and now that's still the same banner, right? Still the same banner. We love to see it.
Love it.
Got to grind. So the topic I want to come on to now, you're one of the most inspirational Black leaders I know personally. I want to talk a little bit about this whole movement with Black Lives Matter and the reason we have this event on at the moment. I want to talk a little bit about, well, first and foremost, on a more somber note, what went through your mind the day and the month around George Floyd's death, around with the real uprise of the movement. Obviously, it's been in place for a very long time, but seeing the world really rally behind it. What was on your own mind whenever we saw those horrific scenes and then the follow-on?
Very simple. Not again, right? And I think this is the thing I've said. I've had a lot of conversations about this with people, and you have to remember that this is not the first. It's not going to be the last, unfortunately. So when you see that, it's oh my goodness, not again. And that was the sadness about, George Floyd. I think the catalyst, and I've had many conversations with people about this, is the catalyst was, we're going through a global pandemic. People are in their homes. They are, anxious, they're feeling some kind of way. That, to me, I feel was definitely almost like the kerosene that ignited things to the level they got to now. I mean, Black Lives Matter, the movement, had been around for years before. This wasn't something that was just new, that just came up. It had been around for years before that. Then, of course, you have this incident that happens and it ignites people. Am I don't want to say happy, but am I feeling positive that the world has taken measurable steps to address, inequality, and inclusion in all its forms. Absolutely. This is even going back to the Me Too movement. If you think of that the world is definitely making steps towards that. But the critical thing in all of this should not just be a, time and moment and, oh yeah, we've just done this initiative and that's cool. Like, you've got to do it every day. I say this, Startup Grind HQ has been an incredible organization that I'm a part of. And in my humble opinion, I love the way it was addressed. We had an HQ session where we kind of spoke about it. And one of the things I said was, look, I'm born Black. I've lived my life Black, and I'm going to die Black, right? I'm going to experience prejudices and injustices in this world, unfortunately. That's just the way the world is. Now, I have a choice. I can, put my head down and be like, oh, woe is me, or I can focus on what I do best, which is utilize this incredible platform that I have to be a part of senior leadership or start a grind right now, utilize that voice. And I even joked to Derek, it wasn't necessarily a joke, but it was like, when I got promoted in April, I was like, it's a good thing you promoted me in April, because if you had promoted me after that, I would be like, this is a token promotion, mate. And it was like, yeah, obviously it's just that sort of thing that you have to also be very careful of tokenization, and tokenization is just doing something for the sake of doing something, hiring the Black person for the sake that you're obviously hiring them. Mm-hmm. Hire talented Black people. They are plenty talented Black people out there. Mm-hmm. Hire them. There are plenty talented Black founders. Let's invest in them. What we ultimately need to do is give these people the platform and the opportunities, which, essentially many of us are ultimately not given, right? That platform and opportunity to share our stories and share our journeys and, showcase the startups we're ultimately working on. And that's what needs to happen, and remain consistent forever and ever.
Exactly. And on that note, exactly as you say, big outcry initially, I try a lot of things on social media, money raised, but then it's all about the systematic change that comes afterwards. So with that in mind, we touched on a few things. 1% of venture capital in the US went to Black founders. There's a whole handful of things where there's clearly a systematic problem. We stand here, we put great leaders on stage. This is one way. There are so many others. What are some of the things you want to see continue from this?
More Black people on the platform. That's it's, so I have my kids, my wife happens to be white Scottish, so my kids are mixed race. When we were up in Scotland, Lochcarcody, that's where she's from, great place, but like no diversity. I could go for days without seeing another Black person. And then what would happen is you'd see another Black person walking on the street, and even if they're walking across the other street, you'd almost be tempted to cross the street and high five them. But you'd always do the, what's up thing, like head up. When we moved back to England, that was kind of like one of the driving forces. Yes, we wanted to be kind of closer to London, but we also recognized as a family that we had to be proactive to showcase diversity and inclusion in our own family, right? We needed to do that and showcase that to our children, that, look, there are loads of other people that look like you. Or the world is very, very diverse. And that's the important thing. And I think as leaders, especially for those that are from Startup Grind on the call, is it's important that you showcase diversity in your events. Don't just have the same lineup of a white male that is in their 40s or in their 30s or whatever on your speakery lineup every single month. Like, switch it up. There are many interesting founders and thought leaders in your ecosystems. Seek them out. You actually literally need to seek them out to ultimately give those people a platform. And if you can't, if you say, oh, look, they're not there, like, leverage your network. Reach out to people in your network and be like, hey, who's interesting that maybe I just don't know of? Because that's the thing, like, some of these people are just quietly doing their thing, literally sitting in the background and just cracking on and doing their thing. And then until you realize that, oh, wow, the founder behind that is, and just so happens to be, like, if you look at Calendly, like, we use Calendly on a day-to-day basis. And I discovered this, seeing that the founder of Calendly is Black. you know, and there's maybe not a lot of people essentially know that, but you need to seek out these people and give them the platform.
And the platform to share this kind of voice. So on this note, this is the last one for me, then we're coming to Alan for the Q&A. Complete the sentence, I would like to be remembered as.
Ooh, this is easy because I've been talking to the team about this a lot. And some context behind it before I complete the sentence is, so many of you know G. G was a VP of Global Community, moved across to our sister company, Bevy. So I essentially kind of took on his role. I know the big shoes to fill, both literally and figuratively, right? You know, G was a massive presence within the startup grind community. And for me, it was just like, wow, what was G's legacy? And I looked at how G was able to kind of build our systems, allowing us to kind of scale to 600 chapters. And, you know, I knew that Phin needed to design and set up his own path. So if you say the sentence again, I'll complete it.
I would like to be remembered as.
Built the most commercially viable startup grind chapter community.
Hell yeah. Alrighty, Alan, my main man. Well, first of all, Phin, thank you again. I genuinely wish I had your time all night. Beers, whiskies, whatever you fancy on me next time we're together. And that goes for all you guys. Please come visit Scotland. It's wet and rainy and your beautiful places will make it so much better. Anyway, Alan, I'm going to pass it over to you and we're going to have some great Q&A questions.
Well, thank you, Phin. That was amazing, inspiring. As you know, I just became a co-director and I've got, you know, I wanted to have a role model. I think you're going to be a great role model, not just for me, but also for other people who are here in the chat. I know we have some fresh directors as well in the chat. Yeah, so super inspiring. And I hope we're going to meet in person one day. But now we're heading to questions in the Slido.
Likewise.
And yeah, so we've got a bunch of questions actually, and we're gonna start with the one that was most upvoted, which was from Declan. So Declan is ready to go.
And so before I answer the question.
Yes.
Sorry, before I answer the question. So this was the one that was most upvoted, right?
It was indeed.
Yes.
Okay. So as I'd mentioned in my email, I am going to be giving away an exclusive Startup Grind swag to, ideally we wanted it to be a director, and delighted it's obviously a director that has got the most voted question. And I was trying to think of a way to do it. This is going to be the most democratic way to do it without, you know, giving it out before. So Deck, you get to have some exclusive Startup Grind swag that we'll basically be working on. And you've got two choices. Everyone always comments on my Startup Grind regalia. Daniel was the beneficiary of one, and I think so was Lisa actually when we had those college jackets. So you can either have a limited edition, one of two, so we can order you a second one. So we only two of them in the world, just you and me would have them.
Oh my God.
The red and black one, or we have a similar gray and black, gray with a black logo on there as well.
Oh my God, it's a true honor, Phin. Only if we can do an official ceremony where I get kind of semi-knighted by Her Majesty himself, His Majesty.
We're gonna make it work. We'll make it work.
It's an honor.
Is it black or gray you're going for? Oh no, black or red?
It's the $1 million question. I think I work better in red personally.
Okay.
Others may disagree, so please, everyone else, completely challenge me on that.
All right, so we will sync online after this so I can get your sizes and measurements, get it done. You'll have to post it for the group when it gets delivered and share that you've got, but there we go. Got some exclusive swag coming your way. All right, what was the question?
Amazing. You made my year. You made my decade, actually. Yes, so question. I'm glad you gave me the swag before, because you may want to take it back after this question. So also you've heard mainly about your successes and obviously inspiring the community, kicking everything off in Scotland. I'm going to play devil's advocate in this then and ask you, what was the worst or toughest event you've ever hosted? And I'm also going to cheat and ask the second question, so I hope it's okay. What did you learn from it?
Oh, I mean, I do always tell the story like transparently. It was my second event number 2. And then I found there was some people, like I think G had a similar scenario where his second event was crazy. So you go from having a high of having, 60 plus people in the room, great event. You've got a great speaker. Ed was phenomenal. And like 11 people. It was that to me, and it wasn't worse because Ed was a trooper, fantastic event, shared some absolute golden nuggets. I was just disappointed in myself that I did not get the people in the room. And we can blame it on the weather as a joke all we want, but for me, it came down to you've got to market your events more. That was just like the critical thing. And you've got to start early. I think I probably came at too lax that, we built up the list and those 60 people that had come, last month, just going to, we send them the email, they're going to register and they'll come along this month as well. It didn't work out that way. So it's something I learned definitely along the years that market your events sooner rather than later. And you do have to proactively market your events to get people to come.
Got it. Amazing.
Who's next, Alan? Thanks so much, Finn. Who's next?
So the next one would be Alex, the famous Alex from Barcelona. If I can, Johnny, if I can ask you, if I can ask you, Johnny, to unmute Alex, because I can't do it. So if you could take care of that.
I can indeed, yes. For some reason, Zoom wasn't playing ball, which is why we should all use Bevy Virtual, but Zoom wasn't playing ball with me earlier, and it wouldn't let me make Alan co-host. First of all, I need to find Alex. Alex, where are you, my brother?
I think I unmuted myself.
There he is. There we go. We're sorted.
I got superpowers. Well, thank you. Oh, thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Finn, for the fireside chat.
I'm so jealous of the beard, man. Dude, like, come on, man. Send me some hair.
They say that men start experimenting with the hair in the face when they can experiment with the hair on the head. So I'm balding. Like, there's something I gotta join. I gotta join the corporate club sometime soon. Anyways, so my question being, this is going to be interesting, I think, for the younger chapters, right? You've been running a chapter for so many years, as have I, and senior chapters hit a plateau, right? After second and third year, we stop growing. Everybody is already familiar with the brand locally. You have already interviewed the best people in your town, and so how did you overcome that? Like, how did you get your chapter to keep growing? If you never hit that plateau, or if you hit it and you overcame it, what were your learnings? What did you try? What worked and what not?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We actually have a term for it. We call it director fatigue. And there've been many talks at the Director Summit about it. I have to be honest, which is I feel like I had a little bit of an unfair advantage, which is I launched multiple chapters, right? So, Edinburgh, 6 months later, Lisa and I, we launched Glasgow. I think it was like 8 months later in 2015, I think it was like maybe January or February 2015, we launched Aberdeen. So it was like we were on this momentum and we were going. Aberdeen, unfortunately, didn't quite work out the way it was. It used to take us like 2.5 hours, 3 hours to get to that event, like 5 hours commuting to do the event. It was brutal. I'll never forget this time, Lisa and I sitting in this taxi and we're looking at each other thinking, man, by the time we get home, it's going to be like a youngster time. Don't know how long we'll be doing this. So I definitely felt like I had a little bit of an unfair advantage in that I was able to launch in different ecosystems and kind of just keep going. What I have learned, though, especially this is now the additional unfair advantage, joining HQ, looking at the data, speaking to kind of chapter directors, is we feel that there's a natural journey that chapter directors go through. And it's what we've kind of called this community growth curve. That ultimately, after 2-3 years, you've hosted every incredible startups leader in your ecosystem, it's actually maybe time to move into a different role, whereby you're not necessarily just the chapter director, but you're almost this, president, as it were. We talk about you being the mayor of your startup ecosystem as a chapter, and this coin that was termed, and that's the person that hosts these regular events. But after 2-3 years, if you're a mayor, maybe you move to an MP, or you join the parliament, or you become the president. We definitely feel like there's a natural community growth curve for our chapter directors, and it's something we're actively working on now, that maybe you don't necessarily have to be the person to host the events on a regular basis, but you mentor the next level of people that will help, and you now move into that role of an advisory capacity and helping your actual startup ecosystem grow to the next level and connecting them to the best VCs or connecting them to the global grid if they're essentially looking to expand. So we definitely feel that there's a natural progression of this. We're actually going to be launching some Mads on the call. C-Team, we decided we're calling it the Long-Standing Directors Forum, and it's probably go live in about 3 weeks. So those directors that have been around, I think we're saying 3-4+ years, are going to get invited to a call where we're going to talk about some of these ideas on how they can essentially help you navigate the next phase of your role of being part of Startup Grind. Because traditionally, the roles were very clear. You're either Startup Grind director or a co-director.
Can I just jump in, like really super quick? I just want to say, like when I started helping with the event, I had seen my roles very much, I could bring network and I could connect people and I could help organize it. And Finn was clear right from the start. He was like, no, if you're going to help me, you're going to host events. And he just had to push me out of my comfort zone, and I wouldn't have done it if he didn't. So it was amazing, and I think that brought me on so much, but it kept it fresh as well, and it shared the load because it was full on having to do so much every month. So thank you, but also that I think that shows why that's really important and valuable.
10 out of 10 recommend it. Alan, congratulations on your first event a couple of months ago, and your next event coming in November. So look forward to that, everyone. And Emma, yours is coming soon. We'll set up. Anyway, Alan, next, who we got next?
Let's go. So the next question is actually anonymous. We've got 2 anonymous questions, and I will ask it myself then. So it says, as a Black man, what have been the biggest challenges you have had to face throughout your career? How have you gone about overcoming those challenges?
Great question. Honestly, it's that fear of people being like what I call covertly racist or discriminatory towards me, right? And sometimes they're not knowing is the worst part. Like sometimes I'll reach out to a certain speaker and they just don't respond. And this did not happen often for the record, but just there's some speakers you'd reach out to, and like, if you look at my surname, Mpofu is not a very English name, right?
My middle name
is foreign.
What are you talking about?
There you go, Johnny Mpofu. It was just that, those frustrations of saying, are people just covertly racist? And I hate that. I don't want to deal with anyone that just doesn't like me for the color of my skin. That's just frustrating and BS. So that is, I would definitely probably say I'd classify as, the biggest challenge, the biggest fear. In terms of how have I overcome that, it's a mindset thing, right? Everything in life is a mindset. And I've just developed this mindset of saying, hey, I'm going to show you love and attention and give you everything that I can. And if you don't like me, man, that's on you. Like, I can't force you to like me. That's on you, but I know I like me. I have this video that Daniel always chuckles to me about. We did it go across. It's like, you got to like yourself. You got to love yourself. You can't go through life worrying too much. And I have to remind myself this often, worrying too much about people that just don't like you. And especially when you are Black or you are female or, you are LGBTQ, like you have just so many people just like to discriminate. And it's sad, but you cannot go through your life essentially kind of feeding the trolls, as they say, especially in the social media world, where it's very easy to kind of get baited into trolls.
So since I have a couple of questions to go from the anonymous, however, I think we could build on top of this answer in this question. And I wanted to get Nick to ask his, if we can unmute him. There you go. Nick, go for it.
Hey, Finn, thank you for all that. And thank you for your leadership and your energy. I mean, it's been a lot of love for you here. But yeah, to follow on with that theme, this year there's been a lot of very tough conversations about inclusion and civil rights, and a lot of businesses were forced very quickly and urgently to have a look at what they were doing to amplify the voices and support people. So with that in mind, what do you, as a black man in the entrepreneurial space in the world, think of new programs that are coming up just for women, just for BAME entrepreneurs, pros and cons of inclusion, stroke tokenism, and what your thoughts are on that kind of reactionary support?
I mean, that's a phenomenal question. My answer, and I don't know if this is an answer which, is acceptable to everyone, is I personally dislike tokenism. It's frustrating. I personally find it potentially demeaning that just because, of this, then you kind of get that. So that's my answer. On all these programs that are getting launched, great, right? If their hearts are in the right place, fantastic. More power to you. Please, the more initiatives that we can do, the better. But just ensure that they're well thought out and you're doing it for the right reasons and you're doing it long term. This is not a trend. This is like, it was a trend on Google Trends, like Black Lives Matter trended and then just like fell off the cliff. This is not a trend. It goes back to what I was saying. I was born black. I live my life black daily and I'm going to die black. So this is not a trend for me. It's not like a part-time thing. So I think for any organizations, and we share this with Startup Grind HQ, we say, listen, if we're going to proactively do this, let's not just do it as a trend. That's why, we're doing Black Leaders Month this month. We're doing a partnership with All Rays, where we're really trying to proactively showcase more diverse speakers on our stages. We've got Black Founders Office Hours, which we're announcing in a couple of days' time with AWS. We're doing next month. It's like a permanent thing. We are fortunate, though, that as Startup Grind, and this is the thing I always try to remind people, that you have to remember, Startup Grind, we're a global organization. Our chapters in Africa, probably 90% plus of their speakers are Black. We would actually love to, and this is something I'd love to see, I'd actually love us to do like a report of just both our globalization and our speakers, and we're trying to see if, the feasibility of that. But look, more power to these initiatives that are ultimately launching, if they're for the right reasons. People need to give those that are underrepresented, underserved, a platform. It's important, right? That's why you kind of see some of these other networks flourish, because they've got the access. When people don't have the access, it's hard for them to get ahead. You've got to give people the ability to have the access, and that's why some of these initiatives and programs are important.
Great stuff. We got a few more. Finn, I'm conscious of your time as well, and of course of everyone's time.
Hey, I'm good.
But I mean,
I'm good. For those that need to hop, feel free to hop. For those that want to stay on, I always have time for this community.
Beautiful. Alan, what we got?
Let's keep the train going. So that's another anonymous question. What resources can you recommend to becoming more skilled at building your network? I would like to hear about that too.
Yeah, I think, is it a skill in building a network? Sure. I guess anything in life that uplifts you, there's a skill behind it. The first and obvious thing, you have to actually be open to learning. To me, when I meet people and start to build a relationship, I actually want to know what they do, like, in awesome certain way. So what are you working on? What do you do? I joined a health club recently. And it's funny when you're, in the change room, socially distanced, of course. I even find myself and it'll start off, like innocently, where you just say good morning, thumbs up. And literally just this morning, I'm talking to this guy and he's telling me about his business, and he owned hotels in Sri Lanka and things were kind of working out, and you just build relationships. So I think you definitely have to invest in wanting to learn more from other people. You have platforms like your LinkedIn's, which are great, where like people think that, oh, networking on LinkedIn is great, so I just got to like send out 1,000 invites and connect it to people. But if you don't follow up, if you don't proactively do engage things with them, then you're not building a relationship. You're just connecting with people, and then it's fake. You genuinely want to basically take time in building relationships with people, and that takes time. The reason why guys like, Alex or even Lisa or Deck and Johnny, they're on the call now and can call me anytime, is because these are relationships that have been fostered for years, right? This is not something that we just met each other a week ago. It's like, hey, can you introduce me to so-and-so? We've known each other for years. So there's credibility behind it. There's like, affinity behind it as well. So you have to remember that these things take time. And I think all too often people believe that, the skill to building a network is just connect with people and that's it. No, it takes time. And like all good things, ultimately come to those that wait. And the more you practice it and the more you learn it and and the more right people you connect with as well. I think that's the other thing. But it depends where you want to sit. I think for some people, for us who are startup ecosystem builders, you have to be open to connecting with everyone. Yes, you must filter, right? And this was, I think, a skill set that I learned over the years that I value. Like these, you almost have like that circle, and then in the circle you have like inner rings, and the rings get smaller and smaller. So you almost have like the core people who are like, if you wanted to call it tier 1 or whatever, if you wanted to put it in tiers, that, hey, if Alex reached out to me and said, hey, Finn, just so happens that I want to be hosting this event and I think Gareth Williams would be great. Any chance you can invite him? Then yeah, sure, you do that. If it's someone maybe that is like super new to Startup Grind and you're a new chapter director and I look on your chapter dashboard and there hasn't been an event, it's a very different conversation. You can't expect it to be like, yeah, let's just make this introduction. It's not like I'm trying to be harsh on you or difficult. It's just that you need to help yourself and show like credibility and that, I'm being super connected and give it time. And if you show and prove, then of course, I open up my network and vice versa.
Awesome. So the next person.
I love Nick's quote there, make friends, not contacts. Very
Absolutely.
true.
My personal favorite value, to be fair. Go on, Alan.
Yeah, I've made lots of friends here, and I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for those friends here in Startup Grind. As said several times, I would be broke and my business wouldn't work at all if it wasn't for Startup Grind friends. Okay, so we're going for another question from one of the guests, and that would be Lisa. Lisa, are you ready? Let me see. I think you can unmute yourself, Lisa.
Yeah, that's me. So I haven't got the chance to interview you before, Finn, I don't think.
Stole the right.
Hug, Lisa.
Stole the right. It was an evil steal by me.
Yeah, so my question was, I think like when I first came to the event that you hosted and we ran the first early Startup Grind events in Scotland, like the format was really unique and it was really different, and the fireside chat wasn't something that a lot of other events were doing locally, and so it really stood out. And I don't necessarily think you could say that now because things move on and things change, and then everything's changed again, obviously with it all going virtual now as well. But what are trends that you would see in terms of how events need to be standing out, or changes that you've seen in networking that that you're?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So it's interesting because Grace, who leads events for us at Stormy HQ, we were on a call there recently, but she actually showed an interesting trend that for virtual, actually keynotes and workshops work really well because it's hard, like, okay, we've made this work and, thank you all for kind of sticking around, but it's just not the same. We're going to finish up this call and then go away. But versus if there's something tangible that you've come to learn and it's workshop driven and someone's showing the presentation slides, that we're actually seeing being very popular with some of the events that we're doing. We did an event with like Carter a few months back and had like 900 odd people on the call, very well received. And it was essentially a workshop. It was a tangible skill that they were learning. We'll definitely see that working. On the networking piece, like people have tried the breakout rooms and it's okay. I'm personally wouldn't say I'm like a massive fan for it. The honest truth is we all just have to navigate the current environment that we're in, and I cannot wait to go back to in-person events. And like, I'm a hugger, right? Like obviously hugger the people that with permission, of course, right? You don't want to be one of those people that just hugs people and they don't want to hug, right? You just got to get the right sense. But I just love in-person events. Katie, who I think was on this call, but she was on our call earlier on, was sharing like how obviously she's chapter director for alumni and they're hosting an in-person event next month. And I was like, oh, honestly, I cannot wait to attend my next in-person or my first in-person event after COVID, because it's just such a different dynamic, which we just cannot, it's very hard to replicate virtually.
Can't wait. Yeah, really great question. And I can't wait. You're all, I said it throughout the evening, any of you at any point, you're all welcome to Scotland if you want to come visit, and we'll show you around. A big friendly Finn hug, and as Daniel mentioned in the chat, a few friendships, 4 and 3 tequilas, and yeah, you're welcome anytime. I can't wait to be back in person as well. Alan.
Yes, I'm still here. Yes. So we are heading to Lakeisha, I believe, who I think will just unmute. You ready? Yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
Hey.
Hope you can hear me well.
Lakeisha!
Hell yeah.
Sending you your version.
I'm going to modify my question just a little bit. So my question was like, how did you, when you first started, define success for your chapter? And I'm asking that because I think as being into my 3rd year, like how I define success when I first started is totally different from now. So I'd be interested to know if you had the same sort of evolution.
I mean, for me, and certainly maybe for us, I think Lisa can support this, is our measurement of success was who is the highest profile speaker we can get. That was like the cream. Yes, you can look at number of attendees and those are KPIs, but for us, it was definitely who are the cream de la cream of speakers who are so hard to get, and those are the people we got. And we had just some phenomenal. There are a few I missed out on getting, like Sir Tom Hunter. I wish, you know, I could have got Sir Tom Hunter, but he declined us.
And all these years later, still chasing.
Right.
We'll get him one day.
But you know, Chris Vanderpool, I remember like we'd chased him for a few times. Then Daniel managed to secure him, which was kind of great. You know, Shaf Rasul spoke like twice at our Start of Grind event. We had like Mike Welch, you know, and these were guys who, and it was funny. I remember this, I think saying this sometimes. We then started seeing some of them. Like Mike didn't really speak at a lot of events because like I would typically like say, who are the speakers who are being spoken about or written about in the press? So they would be very good on their PR, but they just wouldn't like want to speak at events for whatever reason. Those are the people I wanted. When the Herald is talking about, oh, so-and-so is now valued at like 30 million, 40 million, those are the people you want to get at your event because they are relevant. I remember when Administrate had just raised like a major round, we like immediately reached out and be like, hey, you know, you're a startup company that's essentially doing well, let's get you to our event. So that was our measure of success. And it's actually something I definitely advocate for a lot of chapter directors, that you want to exhaust your cream de la cream of speakers. Now, of course, even with all a diversity and inclusion aspect, sure, mix it up, absolutely. But what will actually put your chapter on the map is getting the highest profile speakers on the Startup Grind stage and then building from there, because then you can do more and better serve your startup ecosystem. So that for me, it would definitely be like my measure of success in terms of high profile speakers.
Awesome.
Anything else?
Shall we continue? Yeah, I think we still have a little bit of time.
Sure, keep it coming.
Okay, I've got some fresh questions that just been added. Let me just kind of quickly go through. What's the number?
I want to quickly, there's one man we haven't come to yet, which is a pleasure to have. I don't know if he's on your screen, but we have like the most upvoted at the moment. Our man Jelle from, well, the Netherlands. I see in the chat.
I'm
Hello,
doing
mate.
well.
How you doing?
Great to see so many faces here, and all the directors. It's lovely to see. I was trying to push my question to the background so other people had the chance to ask it. But Finn, I thought it would be a great question.
Better not be a hard one, man.
I mean, I think I've never actually asked you this question, so it's a good one. So,
okay.
What is your favorite book that has provided you with the most value in your life?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a great question, and definitely an easy one for me. If you have not read this book, read this book. It's called Mastery by Robert Greene. Probably, I mean, I love autobiographies, but in terms of a book that speaks to everything in life, Mastery by Robert Greene. And there's a particular piece about it that I personally love where it talks about the plateau, right? Where, you know, you're a chapter, and you can apply this to chapter directors and anything in life, right? You're chapter director, you're crushing it, to maybe Alex's point about the dip. Like at some point, things just like the plateau hits, but you don't have to stay there. It's temporary. Like plateaus and dips are basically temporary. So definitely Mastery to me by Robert Greene.
Awesome, man. I just got Audible, so I'll put it in my bookshelf to listen to, but I will let you know what.
Please do, let me know.
I second that. I just finished the audiobook Mastery. Amazing. It's amazing, seriously. Okay, so we go with, I have a kind of interesting question here that is a little bit at the bottom, but I want to know what you think. What's the most challenging, surprising about the transition from chapter director to HQ team?
Just how much a small team does. I honestly, I remember, so I started 1st November 2018, and then like G's going through my onboarding, and he's like, right, so obviously at the time I had access to, I think I still had access to like 4 chapters. They hadn't taken me off Edinburgh, Glasgow, Aberdeen, and Thames Valley at the time, and it's like, right, I'm going to give you the power. And then you made a super admin on Bevy, and then you get access to all the chapter data, and you're like, oh my goodness. And then you look at all the different processes that we do. It still surprises me to this day how much a small team does to impact and achieve so many around the world. And I honestly, I think a part of me, and again, bear in mind, I sat on 2 sides, right? I've sat as chapter director and now being part of the HQ team is, I actually think, and I was guilty of this maybe when I was a chapter director, I just took it for granted, right? You just, sometimes these things you just don't register. When you go to the other side, you're like, oh my goodness, you have to do that and that. And, you know, we purposely now, like almost intentionally, like to recruit from within, because it really helps for people to have like understood the Startup Grind mission and the Startup Grind values, and then almost like now they join the Startup Grind HQ team. It's great for us because there's like a lot of affinity and familiarity that way. So that I would definitely say was the biggest shock, surprise, just how much a small team achieves managing a global community. You know, 600 plus chapters, 125 countries. That's no mean feat.
All right. We have also a question about the #1 quality that you and Alex F are looking for in regards to the new SG sales and partnerships position.
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, number one, it helps if we can recruit from within. It doesn't guarantee that just because you're part of Startup Grind will automatically hire you. There's of course skill sets that we're looking for. Alex F. Alex is my colleague. He leads the sales and startups team. I lead the success and community teams. And we are recruiting. We're actively recruiting for a number of positions. On sales, I mean, it's probably maybe for Alex to speak for himself on the accounts partnership side of things. I can imagine one of the things you'd want is like a deal closer, like someone that can ultimately close deals. For me, for partner success, I'm definitely looking for someone with like partner success experience. Partner success for us is relatively new. The department was kind of set up for global 2020 actually this time round, but that was obviously for global. we've kind of pivoted to everything virtual. We're selling like things like the partner memberships, and we're ultimately having to fulfill on those. So it does help for someone to have customer success experience, so we can ultimately put together systems and processes that help us scale. The one thing that Alex and I are very, very, very big on is implementing systems and processes that can ultimately help us scale and do things efficiently and effectively. So I would definitely say for customer success, for me, it's, you know, relationship building, key, detail orientated, and problem solver, because those items, those three traits, relationship builder, detail orientated, and problem solver, I think are important when it comes to partner success.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Finn. I'm going to come to my man Mark, if he's still on the call, for what I think will be the final question. I will jump in with one of our own, but I think this question here perhaps ties into something we talked about before as a chance to maybe talk about the vision. So, Mark, are you with us?
I'm here.
There he is.
Patiently waiting, Mark.
I'm sorry?
I say you patiently waited. What was your question?
All right, so actually you had a question for me, and I had a crazy answer for you. And it's going to tie into what's going on right now. Because you asked me, hey, Mark, I see that you're just going gangbusters. You're getting all kinds of great speakers. And my answer to you was, you know, that's because I see my world falling apart. I see like everything falling apart. There's a civil war coming and all that crap, and I'm scared. So I decided to focus on what I can control. So that's why I'm going 100% on startup grind. Question I have is, because since I've changed my mindset and I stopped focusing on the negative and I started focusing on the positive, I've been seeing a lot of opportunities. Like, I don't want to go back to just live events. I want to do hybrid events. You know, I'm trying to build like a 10,000 member chapter. I actually have a call at 10 p.m. tonight with Jasmine, so I can find out how she built a chapter. So my question to you is, what's your vision of the future? Because I see so many exciting things that, you know, we could be part of.
Love that. And thanks for asking that question. So the vision of Startup Grind is very, very clear. And this is something that you're going to hear us reiterating over and over again. You've maybe seen it or heard it, but our vision for Startup Grind, as in the overall community, is to be the world's largest startup community. Simple, straightforward. That's our vision. Very, very clear. When you start to break down on it, this is where it gets very, very interesting. Startup journeys start locally. Right, so let me say that again. Every startup journey, every Skyscanner, Facebook, WhatsApp, or whatever company you can think of, starts locally. You, as those chapter directors that are locally based, have the opportunity to be a part of every founder's incredible starting journey and be a part of that journey. So not only just the start, but how they scale and when they can potentially exit. So the way we're really positioning ourselves to Startup Grind right now is to focus on two pieces first. The starting, so where it happens obviously locally in your Startup Grind, your local chapter ecosystems, and how you can help and support these companies that are getting founded in your local startup ecosystems. And if you can help them at a local level, fantastic, great. If there are ways to plug them into our startup membership and startup program, exciting. And you know, Alex has got some big plans on that to really expand that out. Excellent. And then even the scaling piece, which hopefully the startup program element comes to it. The third piece of that is things like the exits, right? And that's where things get very, very interesting, especially exciting for me, who's working with a lot of, you know, corporate partners I could have never dreamed of working with. Google for startups, we have multiple conversations with them on a weekly basis. AWS, likewise, Oracle, likewise. These are massive companies who are acquiring companies left, right, and center, or have got corporate innovation arms. And we're potentially going to be launching like some corporate innovation opportunities as well. Startup Grind, we're 10 years old as a company, right? And when we did this reorg, it was very clear that in order for us to get to the next 10 years, you know, what is Startup Grind going to look like in 2030? Lots has to change. some of the goals I kind of set is like, what I keep saying to myself is, what is it going to take for us to get to where we are now in terms of revenue, to be $100 million a year company, where you as local chapter directors, locally where you are, it's commercially viable and financially sustainable to be a chapter director. That was always one of my biggest pains when I was a chapter director. Man, I'm putting all this time and effort into Startup Grind, and it's not really paying the bills. That hurts, that's frustrating. We need to kind of come up ways and work with you at exciting opportunities to figure out ways that if you want to do Startup Grind full time, it's possible. That's when I talk about it being commercially viable. That's what we're potentially looking at as well. Would we want to hire every single chapter director? Sure, would love to. We just don't have the resources to ultimately do that now. But we definitely think that there's a business model and opportunity to leverage the existing infrastructure that we have now, but to add some pillars to it to ultimately kind of support the foundation that we've built today.
Fantastic.
Hopefully I answered your question, Mark.
I think it sounded good to me. Yeah, thank you for sharing some of the vision. And I want to just say a massive, massive thank you, Phin, and thank you, everybody who's made it along here tonight. We're going to wrap up there. I'm sure it's very late where some of you guys are. But yeah, thank you once again for joining us here in virtual Scotland, for joining us here for Phin's story. It's a true pleasure to have you all with us. And yeah, I guess let's keep supporting each other. As Mark's mentioned, Global Entrepreneurship Week next week, loads of great events going on. If you get the opportunity to pop in at any of the people who have been here tonight with you guys, pop in, say hi, show a bit of support. You're always welcome at our events here in Scotland. We've got some great ones coming up next month to be finalized. They'll be in the follow-on email. Welcome to sign up. And yeah, final thing, once again, thank you all. It has been a pleasure to have you all with me. Thank you, Phin. Thank you to all the team, CMS, our partners, sponsors around the world. Yeah, I appreciate you. Have a great night, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Well done, everyone. Much love. Thanks for supporting. Catch up soon. If you're free tomorrow night, catch us for the Google Startups event. It's going to be an epic one. Really, really cool. I just shared the link in there. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.